affected by what goes on in this alleyway, begging me, don't stop serving the alleyway. There are places where alleyways are essential to providing effective and reasonable garbage and recycling and so forth pickup. Navy Point was a huge neighborhood back in the 1990s when we first took over the county's garbage operation, where we had to make a hard decision about whether to continue servicing homes through the alleyways behind them or to require them to take them through very limited space between houses to their fronts. And as I understand, at that time we made an accommodation that we would continue using the alleyways. I think where alleyways are available, it is incumbent upon ECUA to try to find a way to use the alleyways, because the alternative is very impractical, sometimes impossible, especially if you have townhouses that are, run from one end of the block to the other end of the block without any spaces in between. How can they bring a garbage can to the front? It just really doesn't work. So I asked staff and I asked this board to insist that that we find a way to make the alleyway work in this particular situation. I sympathize with the young lady's problems, but other people will have other problems in larger numbers if we discontinue service in the alleyway. So I really think we should find a way to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I see no more lights, so thank you, Ms. Pino.
Thank you.
I'm sure there will be more. Okay, I also have a card from Mr. Michael Lynch of 263 Sea Pine Circle in Pensacola. Mr. Lynch.
How y'all today?
Good.
My name is Michael Lynch. My mom and I own a house at 10400 Tanton Road. And let's see, on May 6th, you guys notified that we were going to have a year to hook up to the sewer. Well, in the meanwhile, on April 5th, I just spent $3,500 getting a septic tank septic drainage put in. Now, my mom and I both own this house, and I spoke with someone about it, and that was Miss Campbell, and she said I'd get a 5-year variance. Well, that's only $700 a year I'm paying for that drain field, okay? That's pretty poor. My first drain field lasted over 15 years. So I just don't think I'm getting treated right on this issue, The inspector, when he wrote the thing, he knew they had to know that there was that a sewer was coming down that road. Why wasn't I notified? My mother depends on that money to pay her bills, and it really put my mother in a bad spot with me, And she don't understand all this, so I have to take all the blunt of it, okay? But I think the board needs to help me out a little bit here and do something better.
Okay, and you're asking for us to waive the requirement for you to connect?
Well, 5 years is not very good when you figure my first septic drain field lasted 15. So I'm paying $700 a year just to flush the toilet.
Sure.
Not counting water. I mean, there's a total lack of planning, and somebody's not doing the job on this one.
Mr. Lynch, there's some lights on, so some of the board members may ask you some questions. So, Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, Mr. Lynch contacted me, and I told him, he could come and talk to the board about, having the fee discount extended. But I've asked staff for 2 or 3 occasions to please let me know why would we not tell the gentleman a month before, if he was getting the permit, that, in a month, we're going to, have it where you can tie in the sewer. I just didn't.
Because I would have pumped it a couple times,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
and hooked up.
So I totally understood that, and
I'd
and
rather
I haven't
hooked up
gotten an
anyhow.
answer to that yet, and I've asked twice, so maybe staff can, there you go, let us know.
And Stacy, would you like to address that? Okay. If you'll, Mr. Lynch, if you'll step
Sure.
aside, and don't go away, it's just.
I won't go away.
Okay. And you're recognized, Mr. Hayden.
Good afternoon. So the issue, I got to start with, there was a development out off of Tanton Road, which the developer installed a low-pressure force main, and as part of that, we pay for oversizing to extend a low-pressure sewer service to vacant lots and to other customers that are on septic system. In this instance, that's what the case was. The health department, I guess, issued a permit for the customer to repair or replace their drain field line. I think that was the issue here. The health department did not coordinate with ECUA. Typically, for those kinds of things, they don't. If it's putting in a new septic tank, we are often notified and we say, yes, there's sewer available, or no, there's not. And then, the customer has the option to either hook up the sewer or put in a septic tank. Again, in this instance, the health department did not contact ECUA to say, hey, look, the customer's putting in replacing their drain field. And if there was, then there may have been an opportunity at that time to say, hey, reach out to the customer and say, if you want to, you can connect the sewer.
So would y'all write the
Thank-
permit?
Excuse me, just wait. Ms. Campbell, to continue.
Thank you very much. That was what I thought had happened. I believe that Mr. Lynch thought the gentleman he was talking to worked for ECUA, and he did not. He worked for the health department, and the health department did not say anything to us. So that is why I was trying to get to the bottom of why we find ourselves in this situation. So, and I thought that might be it. So that is why. But now that we are here and we have kind of I get it. I mean, I had a cousin, when we did the Pine Forest Road, who had just paid a lot of money to put in a drain field and said, thanks, cuz, now you're gonna make me tie into a sewer system. So, and I just spent all this money. He was the only one on the road. So I told Mr. Lynch, I get that situation that you're in, and I do wish that we could extend his time. I'm all about extending his time to tie into the system.
So the enforcement is by the Department of Health, right? ECUA doesn't do that, and so theoretically, we should go to the Department of Health, and I think it would be worth us sending a letter to the Department of Health saying, this is what happened. It was, he should be given an extension of that amount of time. Truthfully, the Department of Health doesn't really enforce this unless you need a new septic tank. That's what triggers it. So, but I think it would be worth us doing that. And while we're at it, we probably ought to contact the legislature and say, we ought to be the ones. We have the information. We're doing sewer expansion, and people like Mr. Lynch get caught in the middle. So I'd like to add that to our legislative agenda next time. And I'm sorry, I jumped in front. Does that conclude your comment?
I agree wholeheartedly. I would like to intervene on his behalf with the health department to see if we can get his time extended. And then I do believe that it would be nice for us to go to the legislature and say, hey, we need a part in this because these are our customers, and we need to be able to tell them this is coming, so don't go spend $20,000 to get a new drain field because next month you're going to have a new sewer system. So.
And they don't
And I
have,
apologize, Mr. Lynch, that this happened and that I haven't gotten back. I did copy you on both of those emails, so you'd know I was still trying to chase that down to find out who that guy worked for, but I guess he did work for the Department of
You're
Health.
talking about Joshua M.
Yes, excuse me.
Richards? Does he work for you guys?
No, sir. He works for the health department.
The health department needs to
Excuse
get
me.
tightened up.
Yes, sir.
yes,
That's what we were
Mr.
saying.
Lynch, that's what we're talking
If I
about.
did that at my job,
No.
I'd be gone.
Okay. Dr. Walker.
3 points. Number one, the health inspector does not work for us. Whatever he screwed up on, it's not our bad. Number two, the gentleman mentioned said that Mrs. Campbell told him he could get a 5-year variance.
What-
I'm sure she wishes to respond to that, but
Yes,
let
I
me
do.
say first, since I have the floor, that I've never heard of a 5-year variance or delay on one of these situations. So I hope we can clarify that. And third, I would mention that every time we do a sewer expansion program, somebody was the last person to have their septic tank reworked or their field lines redone. Somebody always comes away feeling like they just got messed up because we should have given them advance notice. And if it wasn't 1 month, it would have been the person who did it 2 months ago or 3. So this is a problem that will occur with every single sewer expansion project we do. And we need to be cautious, with all due respect to this gentleman, we need to be cautious about what kind of policy exception we wish to make in these situations, because it's going to happen in every single sewer expansion program, and sometimes not with just one customer, but with several. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Walker. And the truth is, the engineering department plans these sewer expansions way out. And there's a lot of communication with the homeowners. I think what we need to be doing is talking with the Department of Health, because, you know, they're understaffed too. I'm sure they would be delighted to get rid of this program. Ms. Campbell, your light is still on. Did you have more?
Well, I did want to
Sure,
answer to
go
that
ahead.
question. I never, in 8 years on this board, promise anything that I don't know about. What I promised was to talk to staff about this for Mr. Lynch, and I told Mr. Lynch that he could come to the board and discuss it with us, and that I would be willing to do anything I could do to help him extend. So I did not promise this board would do anything. I never have.
Mr. Woody, would you like to weigh in?
I just want to acknowledge that Ms. Campbell did make initial inquiry and recently a follow-up inquiry to ask about the status of this. Stacy prepared a very nice history for me and was in the midst of preparing a formal response. So I'm sorry that wasn't more timely. I'll take responsibility for that.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Dr. Walker?
Again, 2 points this time. One, hate to say, I shouldn't say that, 'cause sometimes I forget the second one. But 1 point is that this project was done by a private developer, apparently, not by by ECUA, that's line extension. So we may not have had the same involvement in it and the same official responsibilities to inform people, et cetera, et cetera. That would be the case where we did a sewer expansion program. Secondly, I just wanted to say that I'm not saying a 5-year extension or whatever would be a bad idea. Maybe that's a reasonable solution. I think there might be a reasonable solution somewhere out there, but it's something we'll need to talk about.
Mr. Perkins?
Well, I certainly sympathize. I mean, you put 3,500 into your septic tank, get it all just right, and then boom, you have to hook up to the sewer and pay all those additional expenses. And like everybody said, it's the health department that oversees that and permits septic tanks. I for one would not like to see us get into septic tank permitting, because it happens all over the county, and most of the areas are not even in our jurisdiction. It may be Century and Molino and places that we don't serve. So I don't think we really ought to try and take that on from the county. But in this situation, there is no perfect policy in anything, and sometimes you have variances, for a reason to fit into these less than perfect situations. And I would support what I heard one board member say. Why don't we send a letter or provide the gentleman with a letter to take to the health department, saying to the health department, hey, ECUA has no problem if you want to grant this guy a variance for 10 years so he can get his money worth out of his system and then hook up. We're okay with that. And I think that might help him and help them justify it. And I'll make a motion that we provide that letter.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we,
Provide a letter saying ECUA is okay with a variance for this gentleman to take to the health department.
For 10 years. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Walker?
The motion doesn't say a 3-year variance or 1 year or 5 year,
I would say for up to 10 years.
but perhaps you might just leave it that way and let it
Yeah,
be a
let it
matter of
negotiate.
negotiation between ECUA and the Health Department, or possibly even between the Health Department and the gentleman.
Yeah.
Second point, I wanted to add also that we have had sewer expansion programs with people being required to sign up within a year's time if they wish to take advantage of the waiver of the impact fee. We've had that policy since 1995, so that's a 25-year policy, and we've had precious few, really very few complaints about it. Really very few situations like this. I think this one is particularly brought on perhaps by the fact that it's a low-pressure line installed by a developer, rather than a line installed by us.
Do you accept the open-ended suggestion?
It was open-ended in the
Okay,
first place,
okay.
yeah.
Are you good with that, Ms. Campbell? Okay. Any other discussion? If not, we're voting on sending a letter to the Health Department on your behalf. Mr. Perkins, did you? Okay. Please vote.
You ready for me to speak?
Just a second. And it passes 5-0, so we are going to send that.
Okay.
Did you have something more to add?
Yeah, not the ECUA, the Health Department, when they change drugs, they give black box warnings for years in advance. So, I don't buy that, okay? You know what I mean? Someone's missing the boat.
Okay.
And they should give the homeowner more than 1 year notice that they're gonna have because I would gladly have a sewer. Your house is worth more if you have sewer than septic.
Sure. You got caught in that one. Well, I hope what we're doing will help you, and thank you
I
for
hope so,
coming.
because my mother's health care depends on it. That's how I'm paying her bills with it.
Okay. Ms. Campbell, did you?
No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Lynch
Yes.
for coming to the board meeting today.
Thank
I
you.
know it
Thank
was
you so much.
Out of your way.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no more requests to speak in public, in open forum, so I declare the open forum closed. Now we come. Sorry, I should have put you higher up, Mr. Hague. Tim Hague has come back because he has retired from being an ECUA employee for how many years, Mr. Hague? 35 years. So I have a plaque for you, Mr. Hague, and it says 35 years. If I had looked at it, I would, of invaluable service on behalf of the Emerald Coast Utilities Authority and the citizens of Escambia County, Florida, for you to hang in whatever room you're isolating in on any given day. But, I met you at City Hall at a Northwest Florida Water Management District meeting in which you were representing the ECUA, as you have done all over this county for so many groups, and you have done it with professionalism, and you've been thorough, and people all over this county like and respect you. And so for 35 years, you have been our face in the county. So it is with pleasure that I award or give you this plaque. And Mr. Woody, you are recognized.
I would just add, you had mentioned public face right there at the end of your comments. I really want to emphasize that part. Well, certainly my predecessor was largely the public face as the executive director. A lot of that activity happens through working with community partners. And my first introduction with Tim was going through a long list of the activities that he does on behalf of this organization with those community partners. Whether it's economic development, whether it's other units of government, whether other funding agencies and grant opportunities. He's been out there on behalf, behind the scenes, bringing in funds, developing relationships, and he's done a wonderful, wonderful job for this organization. Thank you, Tim.
I guess you could, how are we gonna do this, Natalie? I'm gonna let you be in charge.
Need both of them in the picture.
Dr. Walker.
I request to take the liberty of speaking on this occasion because Tim and I go back a bit further than anybody else. And Tim at ECUA. And it must have been 1986, I'm guessing. Tim was an MPA student, Master of Public Administration student at UWF, and I was a faculty member there. I was also had been appointed to a Citizens Advisory Committee at ECUA, so I knew a good deal about the inner workings of ECUA, and some of the people involved in those inner workings knew something about me. I was very proud to help Tim get his original internship with ECUA. Most of you have heard this story before. I'm just speaking to the ones who are here for the first time, okay? I was in charge of getting internships for our MPA students, and we really thought that they shouldn't get a degree in public administration, an advanced degree, without some practical experience. And so we insisted on internships, which was probably the most intelligent aspect of the entire MPA program. And Tim needed an internship, and I had an in with ECUA, so I called the executive director, who I think was Chuck Wigley at the time, and it turned out that there was some money available and to give Tim a small stipend, and yes, he got an internship for 3 or 4 months. And then lo and behold, he worked his way right into a real job at ECUA. I want to tell one other story. And about that 87 maybe, there was a move afoot among some board members to buy a certain piece of land for a wastewater treatment plant location. And I got a call one day from Mr. Tim Haig, and he said, Dr. Walker, our executive director, Wigley, is out of town in the mountains of North Carolina, and nobody can reach him. This was in the days before cell phones. And we are left without a staff head, so to speak, and some of these board members are suddenly springing this idea on us of paying $500,000 for this piece of land for a wastewater treatment plant site that will be worthless because it will not work as a wastewater treatment plant site. There's something underhanded about this. We, at least some of us on staff think so, but we're sort of powerless to do anything about it. Do you have any ideas? And so he informed me of it. I immediately called 2 of the people involved, 2 of the board members involved, and advised them that this would be a very unwise move to make because what if the News Journal got wind of it or something? And as soon as I hung up with them, I called the News Journal. And lo and behold, somehow they got wind of it. But the board members involved decided to back down and to not pursue the matter, and we saved $500,000. Tim and I saved and some other staff people saved $500,000 of the public's money in that situation. That's a story that I've always, and I still remember and treasure and will always be proud of. Thank you, Tim, for being the intermediary who, in that situation.
Just for the record, I was not on the board at that time.
No, everybody on the board then, except I wasn't on the board either, but I was just a committee member. All these other people, they were all just 20 or 30 years old
Right.
back when that happened, as was Tim.
Ms. Campbell,
As one of the newer members on the board, I just want to thank Tim for all his years of help. When I wouldn't understand something, I'd just call Tim, and he would be first one to explain everything and say, this is how it is, this is what this means, and I just appreciated that, having another person that I could call, especially in the government side of things. Tim would always explain to me what was going on with this group or that group and why they were doing whatever they were doing. So I appreciate you taking the time to, show me what this meant and that meant, and spending time with me at different meetings. And
Sure. And while you're coming to the podium, Mr. Haig, I hope you will come back in 6 months or whatever time it is when we have a vaccine, so we can have a real photo op.
I would appreciate that. I was hesitating to come up here and say anything, but I do want to express my appreciation for your acknowledgement of my service here. But I do also want to say that, one person leaving should not upset the ship. And while I have been as part of the administration, I've always cherished the fact that I was able to work somewhat behind the scenes. And I do want to express the appreciation for the chance to represent ECUA. I always did that with pride because this is a great organization. And I do want to say that the remaining staff, the people you have here, the professionals, the engineers, everyone that works here, it's a best team that I could have hoped to work with. So I do want to let you know that I do appreciate the opportunity, and I very much am glad to come back and give these few words. So thank you so much.
Thank you, too. And Mr. Perkins would like the last word.
Well, it may not be the last word, but somebody might get in there. But I would like to say that as much as, we appreciate everything that Mr. Haig did over the years, I also appreciate what he didn't do. And that's, in a period of 35 years, everybody has a bad day at one point or another. And we hear things as board members, but I've never heard of Mr. Haig ever treating anybody rudely, acting unprofessionally, being less than a gentleman, and performing his duties with just complete professionalism. So, 35 years without a hiccup, that's pretty good record. So thank you, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Okay, we come now to Recycle Star, where we reward citizens for doing a great job of recycling. And I've asked Dr. Alexander to pick a pencil. And the number is 4. So Sean Papillon will be the recipient of the Recycle Star Award, and balloons will fly and fireworks and all the other appropriate things will be done. Thanks to all of the people on this list who do a great job of recycling. Item 7 is approval of the minutes.
Madam
Yes.
Chairman,
Yes, Dr. Walker.
a brief interrupt.
Sure.
Perhaps we could develop some ECUA mask and give those as an award.
Oh, great. Let's hope that
ECUA
they're
logo.
obsolete before we can get them manufactured. I think we're all ready to be done with this. Okay. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes, or does anyone have any changes? Mr. Perkins?
Move approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. With no changes or additions, please vote. And it passes 5-0. We come now to the report of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Ms. Campbell, you are recognized.
Heard. The Citizen Advisory Committee met on Tuesday, June 16th, 2020 at 3 p.m. All members were present with the exception of Dr. Alexander. Item F was a professional service for development of an electrical master plan for the Biomarcus Reclamation Facility. The recommendation Motion made by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Kimball, that the board authorize the executive director to sign the contract with Mott McDonald for professional services for the development of an electrical master plan for the Biomarcus Water Reclamation Facility in the amount of $84,490 with funding from CIP Project RS 425. Committee voted 11-0 in favor. Item G was renewal of contract for automated payments. Recommendation motion made by Mr. Kimball, second by Mr. Ponson, that the board authorize a waiver of the formal bidding process for the automated payment options contract number 2, approve an amendment to current contract with Kubra Easy Pay, extending for 2 years through July 31st, 2022, allowing Kubra Easy Pay to continue to provide automated payment solutions with no charge to the rate, terms, and conditions. And number 3, authorize the executive director to sign the associated contract amendment with Kubra as confirmed their willingness to amend our current contract, extending another 2 years at the same price, terms, and condition. The committee voted 11-0 in favor. Item H was the renewal of an annual unit price contract for cleaning and televising inspection of sanitary sewers. The recommendation by Mr. Kimball and seconded by Ms. Schneier. The board approved the first of 2 optional 1-year extensions of the cleaning and televising inspection of sanitary sewer contract with Gulf Coast Underground LLC with funding from CIP Project R1701. The committee voted 11-0 in favor. Item I was renewal of annual unit price contract for the cured-in-place pipeline rehabilitation R1705. Recommendation motion by Ms. Schneier, seconded by Mr. Perkins, that the board approve the first of 2 optional 1-year extensions of the cleaning and televising inspection of sanitary sewers contract with I'm reading from the wrong one. We have a corrected one. Motion was by Ms. Schneier, second by Mr. Perkins, that the board approve the first of 2 option 1-year extensions of the cured-in-place pipeline rehabilitation contract with Hinterland Group, Inc., with funding from CIP Project R1705, supplemented by transfer from CIP Project R1700, inflow and infiltration as needed. Committee voted 11-0 in favor. Item J was group benefits fiscal year 2021 recommendation made by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Schneier, that the board approve the benefits package of FY 2021 with the following plan components with funding from appropriate budget line item. Number 1 was renew with FMIT as a medical insurer and offer 2 plan designs, 1 HDHP and 1 PPO plan, and provide a portion of the employee-only portion for the plans. And C, provide a portion of the dependent premium for the 2 plans. And those can be found on page 15 of your agenda. Item D was $950 of the employee deductible and $1,375 of the family deductible into an HSA for employee enrollment in HDHP. Number 2, renew the Aetna as dental insurer plan and increase ECUA's contribution toward the premiums for dental, $23.64 per month. Number 3 was renew the MetLife as the vision plan insurer. Number 4 was renew the WageWorks without a cost increase as the flexible benefits administrator. And number 5 was approved funding for the proposed benefits package that includes group, medical, dental, life, and long-term disability insurance. And the committee voted 10-1 in favor, with Ms. Schumo voting against the motion. Item K was the 2021 proposed budget, and I would like to move items F through F through J for approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Dr. Walker?
Thank you. I wish to comment briefly on the group benefits item J.
Okay.
The group benefits that we provide are able to, that so far we've been able to provide to the employees of ECUA. I started to say our employees. We shouldn't think of it that way. The employees of the people of Escambia County through ECUA. The benefits that we've been able to provide have been good benefits. From what I hear, they seem to be superior to the benefits offered by some other local governments in the area, because I hear some complaints that our benefits are too generous. So ours must be, I assume that ours are better than some of the others. Uh, the day may come when we have to consider reducing those benefits. In fact, I think we have cut into the benefits and the generosity of the package in past years. We've done it actually more than once, several times, probably in small ways, but we've managed to maintain a package that's attractive to many people, including many of our employees. And I hope that we'll be able to continue doing that. I want to applaud Kim Scruggs, our finance director, and the many others who are involved working with her to to figure out these things. It's a topic that I've never been able to understand sufficiently or to delve into like some of my fellow board members have, but I certainly respect the ones who are able to do it, especially the staff people who work it all out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I see no more lights, so we're voting on the items F through J. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. Does that conclude your report, Ms. Campbell? Thank you very much for your leadership on that. We come now to item 9A. The recommendation is that the board authorize the executive director to enter into an agreement with the city of Pensacola for reimbursement of costs associated with the 2020 manhole and valve box adjustments, and approve the transfer of funds of $65,000, which will also provide a 10% contingency from CIP project CR 123 manhole valve box adjust to a newly created CIP project. Is there a motion? Does anyone want any more information? This is a fairly straightforward reimbursement to the city of costs for work on manholes. Ms. Campbell?
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
It's been moved. Mr. Perkins?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Campbell, did you have?
No.
Okay. So we're voting on the recommendation, staff recommendation. And it passes 5-0. Item 9B is Beach Haven Northeast Drainage and Sanitary Sewer Project Phase 2, interlocal cost sharing. Again, this is a cost sharing with Escambia County as they do stormwater work, and we are coordinating with them to do the sewer expansion. Does anyone want any further information on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of this item? If not, please vote. And it passes unanimously. Item 9C is Chemstrand Road Water Replacement Project, interlocal cost-sharing agreement with Escambia County. The recommendation is that the board authorize the executive director to execute the interlocal cost-sharing agreement with Escambia County for reimbursement of the construction costs of the water main relocation associated with Escambia County's Chemstrand Road pedestrian and drainage improvement project, and approve a transfer of the funds in the amount of $115,000. Is there a motion? Dr. Alexander?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Again, it's another good partnership with Escambia County. Okay, please vote. And it passes 5-0. Item 9D is disposition of surplus property, Sanchez Lane, former well site. Again, this is a piece of property that is no longer of value to the ECUA, and the recommendation is that we approve and concur in the findings of the executive director that the Sanchez Lane former well site is not necessary, useful, or profitable in the operation of the utility system, and authorize the disposition of the property subsequent to the board's adoption of the associated resolution. So if you will move the recommendation and the resolution,
I move approval of the recommendation
and the resolution. Yeah,
and the resolution.
okay. Dr. Alexander,
A second.
it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes unanimously. Item 9E is emergency storage tank for the Government Street Regional Lift Station Basin and a property purchase. Mr. Woody, if you would like to explain this item, please.
An important part of our consent order with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is limiting, reducing, working on programs to reduce the frequency of sanitary sewer overflows and to address times when we have increased flows due to rain events that due to inflow and infiltration in our system. One of those items on a long list of top ranked projects that we need to complete is the construction of a emergency storage tank that serves the Government Street Regional Lift Station. That facility takes in over 10 million gallons of water, wastewater a day, and there are numerous times where having a wide spot in the road would be helpful, whether it be on those occasions where due to I&I or a rain event we have an excess amount of flow. It also could be extremely handy when there are either scheduled or emergency repairs that need to be made either at the station or on the force main. Having redundancy in the system, we have some elements here and there, but having that additional feature of storage facility is extremely advantageous for day-to-day operations and functions, let alone for maintenance types activities. So over the course of identifying options, our staff threw a wide net and looked at properties in the area that would be good to serve this purpose. And we identified 5 that were at least large enough to hold a 6 million gallon tank. Of those 5, 2 were actually large enough for a 10 million gallon tank. The 6 million was the minimum goal, 10 being a more ideal goal. There were lots of other factors, technical ones, accessibility to gravity mains nearby in order to discharge the flow back into the system, distance from downtown so that we're not adversely affecting the wonderful economic development and redevelopment that's occurring in the downtown area by unnecessarily putting an unsightly tank someplace. Being a good neighbor in terms of screening and the way that we can provide for our needs but not be overt about it. So in looking at all those various factors, we actually got down to about 2 locations overall that were best candidates. They could meet the needs for a 10 million gallon tank. It turns out one of the property owners was a little less interested in selling their property, whereas another seller was more willing. Also, the net recommendation that we're bringing to you now has some other advantages on their site. There's a pretty good stand of mature trees already on the site, which provides some wonderful screening between ourselves and the adjacent road. There's some existing development around us that provide some additional screening and some other uses that are all compatible with this proposed location. We did have a outside third-party evaluation done of the costs for the property, and on a unit price basis, when multiplied by the size of the land that we ultimately wanted to purchase, about 2.3 acres, that comes to about $800,400. Typically, when we negotiate for a property, we do give ourselves about a 15% allowance, recognizing the fact that if a property needed to be taken through eminent domain as opposed to negotiations, that the cost of that process is every bit in that range. So in terms of cash compensation and recommendation here, when those two things are taken into account, the cash to close is $925,000, and the as compared to the 15% markup on appraised value is $920. So those numbers are very close. The differences really in what our ultimate cost are on this property is what we refer to as other valuable considerations. Part of the negotiation process in order to close the deal, we did identify some expansion of existing things we were building on the property that would be advantage not only to us but also to the adjacent neighbor, which is the seller of the property. He requested that we take the existing driveway that we're going to be building to access our own property and extend it to the property line so that he too, for his adjacent property, can access the back alleyway. And then secondary, we will have to be constructing a stormwater detention basin on our property because of requirements of the county. So a request was made by the seller, since he has an adjacent property that he's wanting to develop. If through some economies of scale, if we could build ours a little bit larger than we would normally just for ourselves, and we're to accommodate his needs as well on our property. So that constitutes the full compensation contemplated in this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Is there a motion?
I
Dr.
move
Walker?
approval of the staff recommendation to purchase this property, and anything else required?
No, that's
A
all.
memorandum or anything to approve?
No, you're
Okay.
authorizing the executive director to
All right.
enter into the agreement.
Very good. I so move.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Woody, did you have anything else? No.
No, that's fine.
Okay, good. Dr. Walker?
This is a very big step forward for us, and we shouldn't just rush it by, because this is a real accomplishment to find this property, to find a piece of property that seems so ideal, and for, I think, sounds like a reasonable price. It's just seems like a win for ECUA all the way around, and a good step forward in protecting this community from possible hurricane damage or other interruptions of service in the future. It's a big step forward for ECUA.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. And I think we need some attaboys to Mr. Beasley, who has worked hard on putting this together. There was another site that was being looked at previously, which would have been a real blemish on downtown, and he has been working hard to make this work. It's well buffered. It is a well-negotiated deal. It has no impact on adjacent neighbors. I mean, we're all a little bit battle-scarred after the DeVillers Street tank. So it's nice to have something like this where we won't have an onslaught of neighbors, and we'll do something good for the utility. I think it's a win. Mr. Woody?
Thank you for recognizing Mr. Beasley. He did play an important role in bringing this project home, but I would be remiss if I also didn't recognize the work of Stacy Hayden and Wendy Gavin in going through all the technical review of all our different options. It took quite a bit to evaluate what properties were available, compatible, cost estimates for each one of those associated with access to the property, as well as drainage back away from the tank. So I appreciate all that work as well.
And thank you to you all as well. Mr. Perkins?
Under the DEP consent order, we have certain fund goals that expenditures we're supposed to make. Will this count toward those DEP mandated expenditure goals?
Mr. Woody?
Could I ask Stacy to answer that? I think he's in a better position to.
You're recognized, Mr. Hayden.
I can provide the 1 second answer, and the answer is yes.
Excellent. That's
Good.
good. That's
Good.
good news. Now, I am a little bit curious. So, on this property, Was it for sale and on the market, or did we go out and scout perfect properties and then approach the owners?
It was the latter. We approached we found the properties that would suit our needs, and then we approached several property owners.
So it's not one that had been languishing and not sold, it was kind of a prime property, and I can see where it is really ideal for us, and you know, I'm pleased that we got it, and it will be nice to have that operational redundancy, and it's more than just operational redundancy, it's just operational. I mean, you know, when you're doing all that work downtown and everything, you're working on those mains, it's nice to be able to have a safety net and not lose flow. So, good job.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Hayden. I see no more lights, so we have a motion and a second. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. The next item, 9F, is Lee Street Sidewalks, Drainage, and Sanitary Sewer Project Interlocal Cost-Sharing Agreement with Escambia County. Again, this is a cost-sharing with the county in the Brownsville area. Did you have anything to add to this, Mr. Woody?
Just a reminder that this is a partnership with the county, and they're providing grant funding as well, community development block grant funding. This happens to be an area that satisfies their needs for work within a low to moderate census tract. And by doing that, that allows our funds obviously to go so much further. We are doing some additional work on the water lines as well, approximately $175,000 expenditure. While we're in that area, there's some water lines that need to be replaced. By doing all this work concurrently, certainly that saves us considerably on right-of-way restoration expenses when we're all in the same footprint all at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Dr. Walker?
I noticed that some of the money is coming from the antiquated water lines replacement funding. The antiquated water lines project goes back to the beginning of ECUA, I think. And initially, I know it was designed to provide money to replace water lines of 2 inches or less, and mostly the old metal lines. So really quite stringent restrictions on how that water was used. I noticed on that money. I notice here that it's used to replace a water main. I would like to ask that, if you don't mind, that we ask staff to give us a report maybe next month on that particular funding, antiquated water lines project, and how it's being used these days. Is it still restricted to tiny lines like 2 inches or less, or is it used in other ways too? Thank you.
We need a motion on this, board members. Mr. Perkins?
Approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Walker? Any other discussion on this? I'm sure staff will get back with us regarding that particular fund. Please,
I do have a
Mr. Perkins?
question on the map. So I see we're replacing the Lee Street, you know, we're building a sewer line on Lee Street, the trunk, but then those houses around, those lots around Kirk Street and stuff are kind of encapsulated there. Will they also receive sewer as part of the project?
Mr. Hayden, you want to come answer that?
It's on page 79.
Okay, so I'm looking at the map, and it's kind of hard to see in the black and white, the shaded area. All along the trunk main, sewer services will be connected, so all along Lloyd Street, and I'm sorry, what street, excuse me,
Well, if
Lee
you see
Street.
the other area that's kind of blocked in, it says North Kirk, and there's, you know, a bunch of little lots in there that go around there. It's hard to tell whether it's shaded or not.
Okay, so the area, I guess, west of Kirk Street.
Yes.
That will be in a future sewer expansion
Okay.
project, but this line is simply a backbone to allow
Gotcha.
for
That's what I was
future sewer
thinking.
expansion. Yes, sir.
That's it. Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, please vote. And it passes 5-0.
Madam-
Item,
Madam Chairman,
yes,
I do see on that map, it looks like there are a couple of, 2 or 3 shaded areas inside that polygon, so that maybe there's some going in now.
So, the shaded areas represent those areas for which we're going to expand the system in the future. So, again, west of Kirk Street, that'll be an entire phase. It may be, I'm not getting the difference in shading there that you may be seeing, but it may be split up into phases. So it's hard to tell, but what I will do is go back, see which item you're looking at, and provide you all with a response.
yeah, if you could copy all of us. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Did we vote? We did vote, yeah, okay, good, thank you. Yes, okay. Okay, item 9G is Santa Rosa sanitation agreement. You want to handle this one, Mr. Woody?
Our relationship with Santa Rosa goes back to November of 2014. We've had a series of original agreements followed by First Amendments, most recently being in 2017, an amendment that expires on December 31st, 2020. Previous agreements, as well as the current agreement that we are in, requires a notice of intent to renew no less than 180 days prior to contract renewal. So we're in that time period now for this decision to be formally made. It is the staff's recommendation that, based on needs for resources to provide better increased service to our existing customers in Escambia County, that it would be in our interest to not proceed with this agreement beyond the December 31st, 2020 date. So our recommendation is to not issue a notice of intent to renew to Santa Rosa County.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Is there a motion?
Do we need a motion to not do something? I mean, typically, if it,
The recommendation is we authorize,
okay.
so I think it gives staff
All right,
back.
well,
give
I'll
you
make a
that
motion.
I'll second.
Move the recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Perkins, did you have?
Well, now I know with, with some places, they bring their recycling to us. I guess they have to work that out with the new hauler before they decide whether or not they're gonna do that. We're still gonna allow them to do that if they'd like to?
I would ask Randy Rudd to discuss some of those operational details.
Yes, sir. We have a separate agreement with Santa Rosa County for them to transport the recyclables to our MRF, and this doesn't affect that agreement.
Yeah, and I don't think this decision is any ill will or anything negative about Santa Rosa County. I mean, they're perfectly good people, and you know, we're just kind of focusing on our own area. We've had lots of challenges with the drivers and the COVID and everything like that. They can go out for bid, and they may or may not get a better deal, but it's just you know, it's just a friendly separation. It's not like a divorce or anything like that. We're still going to be doing recycling with them and encourage any kind of community participation with them they want to do with us. We're glad to do it.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell?
I agree with Mr. Perkins. I didn't think of it as being any kind of ill will. I mean, I think they were already talking to another vendor, so, because the vendor called me wanting to buy the can, so I turned him over to Mr. Woody. So I think this is I'm actually kind of excited because my district could use 5 new routes right now, so this is gonna help us. Appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Dr. Walker?
Indeed, we may someday submit a bid on a new, a competitive bid for service over there, who knows? But it's a happy separation, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. There was discussion at the county level about the impact of this on the need for a transfer station, because we're reducing the number of loads coming from Santa Rosa County. Is there any reason to believe that by doing this, we no longer need a transfer station? Mr. Rudd?
Yes, ma'am. The two issues are not related. We need a transfer station regardless. You know, the transfer station will help with the traffic issues we're seeing on the way to Perdido landfill, the conditions at the landfill itself, keeping the route trucks off that landfill face will reduce our damage and our maintenance costs. So the two issues aren't linked. The advantage to the transfer station for collections as well is we're adding these 5 routes due to growth. The transfer station will allow us to adjust that number much more easily and deal with growth in the future. So we need a transfer station regardless of the Santa Rosa contract.
Thank you, Mr. Rudd. Ms. Campbell?
The majority of the commissioners I've spoken to agreed that it was two totally different. So I don't.
I just wanted it on the record.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I see no more lights. We're voting on authorizing the existing First Amendment to residential solid waste and recycling collection to expire by not issuing. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. Before we leave this issue, if you will indulge me, there was a lot of background material, or some interesting background material that was support material on this, and it raised some questions for me, and I would like to ask a few questions, maybe to you, Mr. Rudd, or maybe to Ms. Scruggs. One of the things that was in this material said that our sanitation department has a turnover rate of 26.5% in 2018, 25.6% in 2019, and we're approaching 28% this year.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, which is kind of alarming. I have to assume, unless Ms. Scruggs tells me differently, that that is much higher than other departments. Okay. So, years ago, I remember that Pat Byrne would tell, when we got complaints about the smell from the sewage treatment plant, he would say, well, we do the best we can with what you send us. I worry that we're not sending you enough. I mean, obviously, the thing that's driving this turnover is, on one level, pay. Our salaries are not keeping pace with private sector salaries. And I know there's some other work conditions as well, but certainly that. And I don't want to continue on this trajectory where we have that level of turnover. It's inefficient. We train them, they leave. And I would like to look at this more closely as we, maybe into the next budget year. You know, with the budget, we now have goals. And I'd like to have a goal of reducing that turnover rate substantially, because I don't think it's a great way to run a business. And I'm putting the blame here, not with you. But the other thing that I started thinking, I'm sorry, this is a bit of a soapbox, and I will apologize. But during this coronavirus pandemic, I think we all suddenly realized that the people at the lowest pay scale are doing the most important job of this utility, and we're not rewarding them. And now we're also seeing a lot of racial disparity. And I think proportionally the black members of this organization are in that lower pay scale, and we don't have role models for them to aspire to. So I think it's time for us to look at our organization, to look at some racial equity issues, some pay equity issues, and to see, I mean, what's going on in this country, I don't know, has been festering for a long time. and we're not going to solve it, but we can be part of the solution if we look at our organization and sort of take things apart and put them back together and look at how we do business. Are we enforcing our contract language for outside vendors? Are they truly soliciting minority participation? I just think it's time for us to scrutinize that again. And I will end my soapbox, but I think it's something that we all need to give thought to it. And it starts with looking at the budget and putting our budget where our values are. Okay, enough. Thank you.
I wanted to comment.
Yes. Dr. Allen.
You know, just an addendum to that, I certainly appreciate you bringing that up because particularly where we are currently as a nation, everything that's in play and question. But I think part of it may be pay. We certainly are talking about essential workers oftentimes when it comes to people of color in this country, both black and brown. But I think it's just not pay, but I think it's also being able to create, Mr. Woody, those opportunities for people to see a pathway beyond just being at entry level. And I think if we look around this organization, I think we all would admit that once you get into mid-level and upper level management within ECA, we don't see that, that diversity I think that we all wish for. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I think it's going to take more people like yourself, not just me, because it makes it seem like it's just a black thing. It's not a black thing. It's an American thing. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think all of us on this board, regardless of who we are, have a responsibility to be sensitive to those types of things. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Rudd. Okay.
I had a comment as well.
I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell? Yes.
I want to thank you for bringing it up as well. So last year, when we got ready to vote, even though I wouldn't vote on the sanitation rate hike because there was no incentive in there for the drivers, and we went back to the drawing board and came up with a 1%. And I agree. I don't think it's enough, and I think we need to look at it again. And I think Randy's got the hardest job here of keeping the drivers happy. And with 30% of your workforce is constantly leaving, it doesn't say a very good thing about the organization as a whole. So I thank you for bringing it up as well.
Yeah, these guys are many times the face of the ECUA.
Yeah.
They're going to get the trash cans from elderly people. They're waving to kids who invite them to their birthday parties. And we need to show them that we value them. Yes.
And I think we need to tell the public that we appreciate the general public that goes a long way in thanking our sanitation workers. I mean, we had a lady named Brittany from Domino's Pizza during the sanitation, during the COVID crisis that donated pizzas to all of our truck drivers. And she didn't have to do that, but she saw that they were essential. They were working when other people weren't, and she thought it was a good thing. And, I think we need to appreciate the people that are, we had people knee-deep in sewer during a COVID crisis, for God's sake. And I think we need to appreciate those people. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
bringing
Ms.
that up.
Campbell. Dr. Walker?
I would, two things. First, I would like to mention that in addition to upper movement up into mid-level and upper management, there's also the possibility for our lowest paid workers to move more or less laterally, but sort of upward nonetheless, into other positions on our staff. For example, a sanitation worker may test for and qualify for a position in wastewater management or field operations, water and wastewater field operations. So those are opportunities for advancement to higher paying type jobs and perhaps to more secure type jobs. Secondly, I wanted to ask Mr. Rudd, sometime back, 4 months ago, well, actually, I'm forgetting about the coronavirus hiatus, maybe 6 months ago, we had sort of a brainstorming session here at either the board or the committee I don't remember, about incentives for ways to try to get, get and retain sanitation workers. We had a bit of a brainstorming session here, and I think we sort of suggested to Mr. Rudd and staff that they do further brainstorming about ways to change our requirements of the drivers and so forth, maybe easing up on some of our requirements that would allow us to hire more people, offer jobs to more people. So when I asked Mr. Rudd, has anything come of that attempt several months ago at some kind of brainstorming of ideas about how to make more jobs available to more people?
Yes, sir. We actually had a meeting with a program that helps re-enter convicts back into the workforce. We met with them prior to the COVID situation. One of the ideas was to do a survey of employees to see, what things they would like to see to make the job better. We completed that. No surprise, the top 3 were more pay, more equipment, and less work. The pay issue, yes, we need to look at that, make sure we're still competitive. I can tell you with the national shortage of drivers, it's a moving target. Some of the sign-on bonuses you see now are amazing. So that's what we're competing with. Moving the equipment from Santa Rosa County back over here will definitely help with the equipment issues, but we need to be vigilant about continuing to replace trucks on schedule and provide those new trucks to the drivers. We're doing other things about, to lessen the workload. The prototype the board approved a couple months ago, that is to hopefully lessen the workload for the yard trash drivers, which is where the vast majority of the turnover occurs. It is a back-breaking, hot, dirty job. That is a job nobody wants to do nowadays. So if we can find technology that'll do that job in place of back labor, then I think we'll see a decrease in turnover there. But those are some of the things we're looking at. One of the things was allowing smokers to work for us. And Kim was looking into that with our insurance carrier and all that. So yes, we followed up on all the recommendations. What's strange with the COVID situation is because of everyone that was being laid off, we got a lot more applicants. We heard from a lot of applicants, I want a job where I'm considered essential. And so yesterday, as a matter of fact, I signed the last 6 personnel action forms to fill our last 6 vacancies. So if those people pass the background checks and everything, we will be fully staffed. Now, how long they stay, that's always the $1 million question. We're coming up on July and August, which we typically see a spike in people leaving because it's hot and back-breaking work. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell?
Are our cabs, are they air conditioned?
Yes.
I was watching a show, I don't know if y'all ever watched The Voice, and they had a guy that was a truck driver on there this last year, and he was talking about how hot it was. He was over in Mobile, Alabama, and I sent him a message on Facebook, and I said, hey, look, I know you're just right there in Mobile, and guess what? Our cabs are air conditioned, so if you get tired of being in Mobile,
Yes.
we love people that can sing.
But
Come
then
on
when you
over.
got to get out of the air conditioning and go pick up the pile of yard trash.
Yeah,
Right,
but hey,
right.
at least it's air conditioned. They
Yeah.
weren't air conditioned over there, so I thought that was great. But I wanted to make sure I was telling him the truth. Thank you.
Well, I think you're hearing this board support more resources for you. At least that's what I'm hearing today. And
And we greatly appreciate that, and I emailed Dr. Walker earlier today. We also have an issue with mechanics.
Right.
That is another area where we need to improve. It is another highly competitive area, and we are in a shortfall right now. So we need to work on that area. That directly ties into the driver's complaints of not having enough equipment because they can't make repairs quick enough, and it's just a vicious cycle. So we need to get a handle on the mechanic situation as well.
Do they? Do they still have the school at George Stone for mechanics?
Yes, and we've talked to them.
We work with
and,
them?
yeah,
Okay.
There is such a demand for mechanics as well
Yeah.
that they have jobs pretty much as soon as they get in the program.
Yeah, I have a friend that's got a shop and he can't keep people in his shop. It's just-
All the charter boats just fighting over diesel mechanics. You cannot find a diesel mechanic nowadays. They're making as much as attorneys, you know?
The meat shall inherit the earth.
Well, thank you for indulging me in that discussion, and I hope we're not just talking about raising some salaries, but we're talking about an organizational change that will reap benefits
And
long-term.
that's a good point, because a lot of times, I mean, I have seen people in positions that are tough positions, but if there's good leadership, I mean, they'll stay with it forever. And I encourage the development of people to come up through the ranks and to move into positions that they've done, and use people as mentors that have done it. You know, we've got Gabe in customer service, so he can mentor some people and help show them the way to move into upper and middle management. And once we create a culture, it's not gonna solve all the problems, but it will help. It will help. A lot of times, I have worked in jobs that I didn't like, but I had a good boss, and I stuck with it for a good long time. Whereas I've also had jobs that I really liked, and the boss was just a jerk, and I was gone pretty quick. And so, it's always nice to be kind and considerate of people's needs. And then the other thing is that too much of anything will wear you out. I do charter boat captains, but after 8 or 9 days in a row of being at sea, I don't want to go fishing, And these guys have been working a lot of, and girls, everybody's been working a lot of overtime and just been wore out. And so, that's okay for a week or two, but if that goes on and on, you just get burnt out. So hopefully with the new staff, we'll be able to get people down to more normal schedules, save some money on overtime, and get things right. I appreciate all your hard work. I know it's difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Okay, we will move now to item 9H, system-wide flow monitoring, proposal for long-term flow monitoring, system operations and maintenance. Mr. Woody, you want to outline this for us, please?
An important part of our consent order is being able to objectively document what our current baseline situation is in our collection system in order to both chart and track our progress as we work on I&I projects or lack thereof, depending on what the case may be, as we make progress working on those consent order items. So we have for quite some time now deployed flow monitors in key locations in our collection system, as well as stormwater collection gauges, so that we can equate the relationship between what the response of our collection system is when we have various amounts of rainfall, as well as whatever the antecedent conditions are prior to the rainfall. So keeping that documentation is a requirement of our consent order, and frankly is an operational need for us to be able to chart our progress and determine that we're making expenditures and investments in this collection system in the appropriate places in order to get the appropriate response. So this item is essentially a recommendation to continue that work.
So is there a motion for the recommendation and the resolution that goes with it? Ms. Campbell,
Move staff recommendation
and the resolution?
and the resolution.
Is there a second? Second? Anyone?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes unanimously. That ends the operational items. And we come now to the budget report. Well, I was trying to figure out, Kay doesn't show up on, I know, but it's not on our agenda. I'm trying to, all right.
I'll move the staff recommendation for the residential sanitation truck replacement lease program.
Okay. Mr. Woody?
Just so there's not any confusion, 9H and 9I are two separate items. The consent order item for the I&I flow monitoring is separate than the resolution that's behind it, 9I being for master lease agreement for 9 new sanitation collection vehicles.
They're looking at item K, which is to the Citizens Advisory Committee, and is that part of our agenda for today?
Page
That's an attachment. I think the K
Yeah.
is a lingering remnant from the,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
that's
on
right.
page, the
Yeah.
recommendation's on page 95.
Right, right. So that doesn't require
sorry, that's
action.
confusing.
Okay. All right, we come now to the budget report. Ms. Sheldon? Oh. We did not vote on that? Oh, sorry. Please vote. The motion included the resolution, so.
I think K is just in there accidentally, I mean.
So so we don't need to act on I either, right? Is that correct, or no? Okay.
K goes with I.
The item that has a K in the corner, that K is a remnant from being an attachment
Right.
to the previous items. I apologize, that's confusing. It's supporting, it supports 9I.
So do we need to act on 9I?
You do need to
Okay.
act on 9I.
All right, well,
Yes.
I apologize, folks. Entertain a motion.
It was confusing because there's
Yeah.
that K up there, but
Yeah.
it
All
goes with that.
Is there a
All that goes
motion?
with I.
Is there a motion for resolution number 20-09 then?
Yes, ma'am, I'll move.
That's-
20-.
And is there a second? Okay, now please vote. I think I did that. And it passes unanimously. Okay, sorry about that. Now we come to the budget report, Ms. Sheldon.
Good afternoon. The budget report is as of May 31st, and it represents 67% of the fiscal year. If you look at the water fund, that's on page 100. We're at about 62%, and the sanitation fund is about 69, 70%. Again, what we're seeing, some of the overages in our overtime, repair and maintenance for vehicles, gas, oil, and lubes. There's some things, and I think we've talked about before, that we pay on an annual basis. And so if we pay for those up front at the beginning of the year, then we have to, that smooths out over the rest of the fiscal year. So some of that overages could be due to that. Some of the examples for that, I'm sorry, I have to take my mask off.
Oh, yes, please do.
Some examples for that are the insurance policies, if we pay them up front at the beginning of the year, and then they average out or smooth out over the year. Subscriptions, annual permits and licenses, things like that cause that. And then also some claims liabilities through the risk management have us a little higher than where we want to be at this point in the year. But overall, I think we're on pretty well on target. If you give it a 5% threshold either way, then we're right on target.
Any questions from the board? Dr. Walker?
What's the worst news you have for us?
Great.
Well, I think at this point, I don't really have any worse news. We're not seeing the impact on revenues that we thought we were going to see due to the COVID, so that's a positive. With sanitation, it's a monthly flat fee, you know, depending on what your level of service is. So that's not based on any kind of consumption. So we're continuing to bill for that and continuing, you know, customers are paying their bills. We did have some delinquencies there in March and April. We've put those customers on payment plans so that they can bring their account current with their current month bill and then put the rest of it on a 12-month payment plan so they can start paying their bills that way. But again, we have not seen the doomsday predictions and projections over the loss of revenue that we were afraid we might see, you know, when this first started, because we didn't really know what to expect. But so the good news is that we're pretty much on target.
Mr. Perkins?
On that note, there's a Eventbrite CivicCon event tonight on the ECUA budget.
It was last night,
Oh, was it last night?
And it
My
was-
bad, I missed it.
and it was, go ahead.
Yeah, if we could get a report on how that went.
It was, go ahead, I'll let Bruce give his 2 cents.
Go ahead.
If we're okay, I'll just move on to the executive director's report. I've
Okay,
got-
all right, that's good.
catch a couple things on there. And just so I can stick with the order of my notes, if you don't mind, Mr. Perkins, I'll get to that probably as item number 3 on my comments. The Citizens Advisory Committee at your last meeting did make a request for receiving some information 2 days earlier than you usually receive that. You're used to receiving your board agendas on a Thursday, same as with the CAC board. We have made changes and revised our schedule, so we will start producing those now on Tuesdays, which will provide the CAC Citizens Advisory Committee additional time. I would have liked to have done the same for the board meeting, but because the CAC meeting and board meeting are only 1 week apart, we need that one day in between Tuesday and Thursday to produce the minutes and et cetera, so that wasn't a practical option for us. In the month of July, we're going to add an additional, or it's my recommendation, we add an additional special CAC meeting on the 14th. There's been a request to spend a little more time on the budget before the CAC committee, and in order to do that and still accommodate the need that we have to issue our preliminary rate-setting resolution, and then the final one that follows in August, and give us time then in September to issue rate notifications, we need to kind of keep on our usual schedule. So I propose we add an extra day. And you'll remember that our recommendation for water and sewer is no rate change, but we still need to go through that process, I believe, and make sure those notifications go out on time. CivicCon, as Board Member Perkins mentioned, a local organization that provides interesting information about civic organizations, municipal government, city government, and just last night they gave about a 42-minute presentation on the ECUA's budget. It was very high level, very general, something you would give in a civics class, you know, to a classroom perhaps. There were mostly correct information, but we counted about 5, maybe 6 inaccuracies, either misinterpretations of some data or a few things that if they had asked a few questions, I think could have been clarified ahead of time. Kind of stole my thunder. I'm actually going to have something in the board report that itemizes what those 5 items are. So briefly off the top of my head, some of them were items like identifying that we were flush with cash. We are not flush with cash. We're in a good position. We do very well with and efficiently and very considerate about the revenues that we receive from our ratepayers. And I think we're in a good situation there. But there were some misnomers about some of our expenses. A comment made that our rates have increased 60% in the last 10 years. Kind of sensationalizes the fact that if you look at just the operations and maintenance portion of our budget, our rate of increase per year is not much more than the CPI, as compared or contrasted with the capital investments that we've made to provide additional services, whether it's the MRF, recycling efforts, certainly the investments we made in the collection system, our compliance responsibilities, regulatory with the FDEP for our I&I program. If you go back 10 years, you're actually picking up some debt service as well for CWRF. So those things are really what has driven the rate of increase. And if that debt service wasn't there, I would say we compare very favorably with the CPI over the last 10 years. I want to touch base a little bit on interarity. That project continues to move forward. You may have seen a little bit of coverage in the media, or if you watch the county's live broadcast or recorded broadcast, there have been a couple occasions where groups have gone before the county to express some issues or concerns. Largely, almost exclusively, those are really focused on concerns about the cost of the MSBU. So while there have been some minor questions here and there, maybe a contractor could have done a better job dealing with the utility conflict or something like that, those have been relatively routine and not too common. Most of the focus at the meeting I recently attended fell into one of the following four categories. They were either a concern about MSBU being a high cost, or there were concerns that they weren't adequately informed by the county prior to the project, prior to the contractor showing up. There were a few new property owners who were upset that neither their title company or the real estate agent or prior owners disclosed information about the extra upcoming assessment on their taxes, so that came as a surprise. And then there were some that had some policy disagreements on whether this ought to be a project owned, run, and managed by the county versus owned, run, and managed by the ECUA. And that, I would owe that back to some misunderstandings about the responsibilities and how MSBUs are created in the first place. Overall, though, the update that we gave was that Stacy gave on our behalf was that the project's about 47% complete in terms of work in the field. It's a little more than that complete in terms of time on the job. The estimated substantial completion date right now is mid-August of 2020. I think, again, that's substantial completion, not final completion. And right now, the contract price, people in the audience were throwing around numbers of 10 and 15 million and odds and ends. The reality is the original contract price was 4.5 million. That's contract price plus a couple of minor change orders. And that's still well below the original construction cost estimate of 5.2. So the project, from our perspective, is moving along reasonably well. Then last, just an FYI, kind of a reminder, I will be out of the office July 1st through 5th of next week. And during that period of time, Randy Rudd will be the acting executive director. I will be monitoring email, and I will be available by phone if necessary, though.
Any questions of Mr. Woody? Dr. Walker?
The Interarity Island project is currently sewer only. Is that correct?
Yes, the stormwater work was completed as a prior project. We're just talking about sewer at this point.
Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, part of that, I felt like part of the inaccuracies were the gentleman that did the Civicon didn't understand the fees. So like the sewer improvement fee, he didn't understand what it was, or the capital improvement fee. And I think maybe we should send a letter, to them that in the future, if they would, wanted to talk to us about that, reach out, because, he made a statement that we weren't transparent, and it's like, well, you didn't call. If you'd have called me, I've been real transparent with you, told you what it all was. So, some of his talk was really good, though. It's kind of like you said, Civics 101, and I thought, well, that's good for the community to know how it works, but then when they got into the tail end of it, those were some comments made, so. But other than that, I didn't have anything to say about it.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Woody?
The other thing I would add to that, it's my understanding that they came and contacted us, or like April or something like that, or, pardon me? February, okay, even a little further ago than that. And this was scheduled to happen in the spring, but due to COVID-19, that it was postponed. Spoke with Patty for some period of time. He was given other contact names and phone numbers to get more information about the I&I program and other capital programs, and in talking with staff, he never followed up on those.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins?
When we did the sewer improvement fee, it was for relocating the Main Street sewage treatment plant. And I'm curious, when will that fee expire? I mean, we might not know off the top of our head, but can we, at our next meeting, can we, or in a board report or something, can we just get an update on when it's paid off, when the bonds are paid off, and when that fee is scheduled to
I
expire?
heard 2029, right?
Ms. Sheldon, do you want to address that?
Yes, right now we have, still have outstanding state revolving funds, loan funds, SRF loans, which were done for the movement of the treatment plant. And those don't pay off until 2029.
2029?
So we are using the sewer improvement fees to pay the debt service. It covers the debt service with just a slight little bit left over. But that's what we're using. I don't know that it was technically pledged as the revenue stream to pay back those loans, but that's what internally was decided, that we would use those fees to pay that off.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Ms. Campbell? Oh, sorry. And that concludes your report, Mr. Woody, yes? Okay. We come now to the attorney's report. Mr. Beasley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report other than to present and ask for a motion from the board for approval of the release agreement attached as item 12A, and included in the motion is authorization of the executive director to sign the release. Brief history background: this was related to a parcel of property that is north of the Veterans Park downtown off of 9th Avenue and Ramona. A developer, in conjunction with the city of Pensacola, entered into an agreement to commence development of what's called the Hawkshaw project, Hawkshaw condominiums or apartment, the multi-use project there. Upon commencement, they discovered that the main water line was not in the easement on the Ramona Street side. It was actually outside of the easement in the wrong location. This created a bit of a panic because there were timelines for the developer to start performance in that area. They made a contact here. It came through my office. Stacy Hayden actually got involved, jumped right on it, worked with the developers, worked with the developer to not only relocate the line, but relocate it onto the north side of the parcel, which was better to accommodate the development in any event. Got the line relocated and enabled the developer to meet all of their timelines with success. We then made a claim against the engineer and the surveyor for locating the pipe in the wrong location. It did not result in litigation. It was resolved short of litigation, and the result is this release agreement is that we will receive $73,127.28, which fully reimburses the ECUA for the expense related to relocation of the pipe. And if the court, and if you would, at your pleasure, move to admit that and allow the director to sign it.
Is there a motion? Ms. Campbell?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Dr. Alexander? By the way, anybody who says that government is bloated and slow didn't see this happen, because from the time the problem was identified until we took action was like a split second. It was really government at its best, as far as I'm concerned. And that's from every person, from the engineers, Mr. Hayden, to our attorney, to the whole organization. We are voting on item 12A. and it passes 5-0. And that concludes your report?
Yes, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Okay. Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to ask the attorney a question.
Sure.
Sometime back, we discussed the matter of pursuing a settlement against the firm of Odom and Barlow and/or their insurance company. I think we instructed the board attorney to pursue this matter, to try to find a law firm that would take the case on a contingency fee basis and pursue it aggressively. May we ask for a report, a status report on that effort?
Mr. Beasley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Pursuant to the direction of the board, I have sent the pleadings and the information related to the case to a firm in Jacksonville. I don't have the name currently, but they do specialize in legal malpractice, with the prospect of asking that the matter be taken on in contingency. I had a follow-up call after sending the pleadings to explain. They were supposed to get back to me. I expected them this week. Actually, have not heard back from them as to whether they would agree to take it. And so that search has been conducted without interfering with or interrupting the current work of the current attorneys. I wanted to secure a bid or acceptance by another firm before we discharged the current firm, or before I brought it to the board with the prospective discharge. Also on the issue of settlement, the proposal, we sent a settlement offer pursuant to the direction of the board, which really represented our full out-of-pocket damages. In response to that, the response was to assign to us the rights under the insurance carrier to pursue the firm's insurance carrier, and in exchange release the firm entirely. So let the firm go, but receive an assignment. I may have discussed that with the board briefly because at the time that had just come in. We have now looked at that and have determined that the reservation of rights is so extensive in that matter that we would not be benefited by, we might be left with an empty hand if we take and release the firm and just take the insurance assignment. So instead, we have come back and made a additional offer, rejecting that offer but making an additional monetary offer, and that is in their court now at this time. My thought being, if we do end up settling, we will not need to engage a new firm. We're at a critical point in the case where if we're going to settle, we need to settle now. If we're going to engage a new firm, then we need to switch gears at that point.
Is any of this sensitive that should not be brought out in a public meeting?
I think what I've said now is about as far as I can go without having any executive session. I mean, there may be other procedural aspects of the case we can talk about that are a matter of record. Obviously, any kind of strategy would be something we'd want to talk about in executive session.
Dr. Walker?
I would just like to add that even though I have great personal affection for Mr. Odom, that I think we as a board have a responsibility to pursue this matter and to pursue it actively and to not let it be forgotten or not let it drop or not let it just lapse. So I urge us all to try to keep on top of this and to see to it that we pursue it as best we can.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Mr. Beasley?
Yes, Madam Chair, it does, Dr. Walker's comments does cause me to recall when Mr. Woody came on board, we've talked about several procedural changes and reporting changes, and some of those changes you'll see over the next couple of board meetings. But one of them is that Mr. Woody suggested that I start producing a quarterly litigation report that gives simply status indications, information that's of public record, but that gives the board kind of a progress report, not strategic, not attorney-client privilege information. I have now produced the first of those to Mr. Woody. I believe it did go to the board. You will see one of those every quarter, and it will give basically a running case update on each case that is outstanding for the ECUA, so that you at least have the information about the progress of the cases and know the names and the details so that you could ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Okay, we have one more item, and I'll be quick. This was, I added as 13A cutoffs, and Ms. Shelton alluded to this. I was just concerned because our 120 days has expired. I want to make sure that we have a good way of notifying customers of their options if they are facing cutoff of their utilities. How do you communicate to them when someone is about to have their water and sewer cut off or sanitation?
Well, the first thing they would get would be a delinquent notice saying that their bill is past due. Then they are also, I think they have a certain amount of time, and I can't quote the number of days, I'm sorry. They have a certain amount of time to pay that bill. If they still don't pay it, then they'll get another letter that says you are still delinquent. If you don't pay by a certain date, then you will have your services cut off. So they're given, I want to say at least 30 to 45 days notice that their service is going to be cut off. Give them time to get in and pay. I may be off on the number of days, but I know it's more than a day. We give them sufficient notice. And then if they still don't pay, then their service is cut off. And then they are, I think they are either given a phone call or some other kind of notice. And Gabe Brown would have more specifics on exactly what his staff does. And then they need to come in and pay to get their service turned back on.
So we as a board talked about this issue and our concern for those people who were suddenly hit hard by the coronavirus, and our interest in giving them an opportunity to pay over time or some kind of even charitable contributions to help them. Has anyone followed up on that? And what are we doing to help those people who really, I mean, they're not deadbeats. They are out of work because of a pandemic. I mean, how are we communicating to them that we are a compassionate organization and understand that this is vital services and we want to help? I mean, and maybe that's not in your department, but I want to make sure we're doing something. Mr. Woody?
Yeah, part of the process when we put folks on notification is not to give them only one option. Certainly, paying a back bill in full is always certainly the encouraged and preferred option. We recognize that is not always an option for our customer. And that's the reason why we provide a couple of different means by which those back bills can be financed over an extended period of time, provided they can keep current with another bill going forward. We do partner with some outside agencies for when we have hardship cases, and provide our customers with that contact information so that they have an opportunity to plead that case with an outside third party, so that we aren't the arbiter of their eligibility, and an outside third party is. And oftentimes some of our customers are helped in that way. You had mentioned before, we do have a fund that we've encouraged and promoted ourselves that helps provide, that our customers can contribute to, a utility assistance program, and we provide those funds over to that third-party administration as well. I didn't ask for, so I don't have a number off the top of my head to tell you what the current status of that account is.
Well, I had a situation last week where a man had a notice that his water was being cut off, and he was terribly distressed about it. And it turns out that there was a reading error that happened, and it really wasn't his fault, and he was about to have his service cut. And you know, I'm concerned about how we communicate with these people, that we don't come across as this heavy organization, because in his case, it was not his fault. He had paid all of his other bills, but there was one reading that was way out of proportion with everything else, and yet no one was working with him to help him through that, which was, it was eventually resolved when I intervened. But, you know, there was a communication lapse, and I'd like to fix those any way we can, and I'd like to help if I can. Anyway. We have no other unfinished or new business. We come now to board communications. Does anyone have anything? Ms. Campbell?
I'd like to wish everybody a happy Independence Day because I won't see you before. Hope you have a good day and filled with love and family.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. We come to our next open forum. I have no pink slips. Does anyone wish to address us? If not, we are adjourned.